So, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What Selma meant, apart from being a PCPI employee, I am a proudly graduate of the Maytree Leaders for Change program. Okay. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Ratna Omidvar. Ratna has accomplished so much and is such an inspirational and leader that I am also challenged by this assignment, primarily to the time frame allocated to me. So, I will do my best to keep within my time limit and try to highlight some of Ratna's dedication, commitment, and tireless work with immigrants. Ratna is the president of Maytree, a Canadian charitable foundation dedicated to accelerating the settlement of immigrants and refugees. It focuses on empowering individuals, funding innovative ideas, supporting effective leaders, and finding ways to achieve change and enhance the public good. Under Ratna's leadership, Maytree has gained national and international recognition for developing, testing, and implementing programs and policy solutions related to immigration, integration, and diversity. It's not a coincidence that we invited Ratna to speak to us this morning. We know for a fact that she is a motivational and inspirational speaker who has empowered so many groups with her presence and wisdom. As an immigrant, I personally have been inspired by Ratna's word that I would like to share with you, something she once said that was particularly meaningful to me. Ratna said, "We must live up to our end, work hard, learn the ropes and the language, take the comfort from our community ties, but also reach out and make new friends. Obey the law of the land, even when these collide with personal values. Be open to new ideas and not live in bubbles that hold us hostage to old ways of thinking." Also, she says, standing on the sidelines is not an option for anyone, and definitely not an option for immigrants. Ratna's CV is so extensive that for me to cover all her achievements, affiliations, honorary, diplomas, awards, and recognitions, I would need the whole day. That's beside her appointments to a number of task forces, to name few: Prime Minister Paul Martin's External Advisory Committee on Cities and Communities, Transition Advisory Board of the Premier of Ontario, and the Task Force in Modernizing Employment Insurance. It was no surprise to me that she was recognized as one of the top 10 nation builders of the decade. This morning, we have a wonderful and a unique opportunity to listen, and I repeat, to listen to one of Ratna's personal experiences that have catalyzed her leadership. A Canadian in the making, letters to Canada. Please join me in welcoming Ratna Omidvar.
Thank you so much, Amal, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to PCPI for inviting me to speak to so many of you whose lives are bound together by the common experience of coming to a new country, starting life all over again, in time succeeding and helping Canada achieve its greatness. I'm particularly delighted to be here today because the work I do sometimes traffics in the ideas of policy and removes us from the lived experience that is so much part and should be more part of our work. I'm an immigrant like you, even though I came 30 years ago. I think that once you're an immigrant, that experience is always going to stay with you. So instead of giving you a speech about what works and what doesn't, I thought I would get a little personal, share my story with you, because your story is my story and my story is your story. I think all immigrants, regardless of where they come from or where they are going, have a starring role in the same 3-part television reality show. And the first chapter is Exodus, the next chapter is redemption, endurance, and the final chapter is hopefully redemption. So these are my chapters, 3 letters to Canada that I wrote. The first letter is written in the winter of 1986, approximately 5 years after I arrived. I write, "Dear Canada, I got my first glimpse of you from the airplane. Everything I imagined is unfolding in reality. A vast land, forests, green spaces, dotted with small and large lakes. Even as I looked at you from up here in the skies, I could almost touch and feel freedom, possibility, and optimism. I clutched a piece of precious yellow paper in my hand that allows me to be a part of you. Just a piece of paper, but so hard to come by and so very valued. When we left Tehran 6 years ago in the early dawn and fled across the border into Turkey with our 1-year-old daughter, we had no idea where we would find refuge. Those of us who are Iranians or who have Iranian friends know that every Iranian has a horrifying story of escape to tell. In retrospect, our story is rather mundane. A long bus ride, a nervous exchange of papers at the border, then into Turkey in the middle of the night, and then finally a flight to Istanbul, and then Munich. Safe in Munich, we started to think of where now? Almost by default, we chose Canada. We had family and friends. We had heard of and admired your principal citizen, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. In school, I had learned about the Hudson's Bay Company and completed a fascinating school project about lumberjacks. That was the sum total of our knowledge about you. A charismatic man, a series of romantic, and as I later understood, outdated stories. To be fair, Canada, you knew even less about me. You will remember that our first introduction to each other was not happy. Your representatives in Bonn very quickly dismissed our interest in you and noted that we were not the kind of immigrants that you wanted. But we knew people who knew people in Toronto who knew your people in Ottawa. And so you summoned us back to Bonn for another interview. And this time, the same representative shook our hands and said we were exactly the kind of family Canada needed and predicted a great future for us. Jobs aplenty, affordable housing, wonderful weather, cheap loans, great schools. I have now lived with you for 5 years, and I am no romantic and expected an uphill climb, but not a mountain of hurdles. These have been hard years, filled too often with disappointments. At the same time, I have learned much about you, and I'm slowly beginning to understand you. You, in turn, I hope, are beginning to understand me. You promised me much and have given me much. I have no fear of persecution. I can speak my mind and join whichever political party I wish, although I am surprised that there is so little choice. I can live where I want, associate with whom I want, and go about my life the way I want. But there is much that is difficult to deal with. You have unwritten rules that I find hard to decipher. You have norms and practices that are difficult to understand. And there are invisible barriers that I must learn to navigate. But in order to survive, I am beginning to slowly learn these rules of engagement. I know now that it is not Canadian to be curious for fear of being taken for an intrusive busybody. I no longer ask someone who I meet, where they live, what they do, how much they paid for their car, or worse, how much they earn. Nor do I stand too close to people for fear of infringing on their personal space. This is, to be frank, for someone from India, an entirely new territory and experience. Indians have a healthy curiosity about everyone else. And in India, to be alone is to be lonely. There is a very safe topic of conversation, though, and we're learning to use it to good effect: the weather. Ice flurries, black ice, snowstorms, ice storms. I must really admonish you for forgetting to tell me about the myriad expressions of Canadian weather, and for not providing me with a list of all the winter essentials that I would need: hats, mitts, gloves, earmuffs, snowsuits, long coats, short coats, fall coats, winter coats. But then I have also learned that after every winter comes spring and then summer. And just as your summers are glorious, I continue to hope that we will find our metaphorical summer, even as I shiver in your cold winter. Don't get me wrong, people in Canada are kind. They are very kind. They look at me earnestly and ask me slowly, "Do you speak English?" And I am stunned. Me, top of my class in English Lit, member of the debating team. And it dawns on me slowly that to them, I am just another brown face. There are other things that daunt me. Our search for work is far more difficult than anything your representative in Bonn indicated. Wherever we go, we are asked for a magical dust that we cannot buy for love or money. Canadian work experience. We have become friends with many others, doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists, who find themselves in the same quandary. We sit for hours in coffee houses to figure out what to do next. Many of our friends are working in factories or driving taxis. Others, like us, have sunk life savings into small businesses, which more than likely will not succeed. There is a look of gray despair in all our faces. Some are not coping well at all. They have left or simply disappeared from our circles. I have received some interesting advice, and I am pondering over it. It relates to my name, which is apparently, in spite of the fact that it is only 2 syllables, very difficult for Canadians to get their tongues around. And I have been advised by very well-meaning friends to change it. And I have even come up with a short list of names: Rita, Rosa. But in the end, I know I will not be able to do this. My name is as much part of my identity, handed down to me by my grandmother. It is as indelible as the color of my skin. So I guess you and I, Canada, we'll just have to manage. But there have been a few breaks as well. Through volunteering at my daughter's childcare center, I have come to the attention of the director of the center. She has watched me raise money for the center through small efforts like hosting potlucks or reading palms. Every Indian can pretend to read